Good afternoon and welcome. For those of you joining us from Italy, benvenuti. My name is Matthew Kranig. I'm the Senior Director of the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security at the Atlantic Council. And it's really my pleasure today to welcome you to today's event, a conversation with Alessandro Profumo. The Atlantic Council is delighted to host Mr. Alessandro Profumo for today's discussion on key topics, including challenges to defense and security in Europe, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, challenges and opportunities posed by emerging technologies, and the future of transatlantic relations. Alessandro, thank you for taking the time out of your busy trip to Washington to speak to the Atlantic Council and our global audience.
It's always a pleasure to be here with you at the Atlantic Council, Matthew, so I'm really delighted to do so.
We're delighted to have you here. And here at the Atlantic Council, we have two programs that focus on these topics. Our Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security works to develop sustainable, nonpartisan strategies to address the most important challenges facing the United States and its allies. We also seek to honor General Brent Scowcroft's legacy of service and embody his ethos of nonpartisan commitment to the cause of security, support for U.S. leadership and cooperation with allies and partners, and dedication to the mentorship of next generation of leaders. In addition, our Rafiq Hariri Center for the Middle East and Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative works with allies and partners in Europe and the wider Middle East to protect U.S. interests, build security and peace, unlock human potential in the region, including work on the role of countries like Italy in fostering security and prosperity in the Mediterranean basin. So there's a lot for us to discuss today. I know you've just returned from the Munich Security Conference. I was there as well. We have the challenge of Russia's war in Ukraine, the rise of China, emerging technologies, so no shortage of topics for us to cover today. So for those of you who don't know, Alessandro Profumo has been the Chief Executive Officer of Leonardo S.p.a. since May 2017. Prior to his position at Leonardo, he led a distinguished career in the financial services industry, including positions at Unicredit, where he was CEO from 1997 to 2010. He also serves on the board of a number of institutions, including as honorary chairman of the Italian Industries Federation for Aerospace, Defense and Security, president of the Aerospace and Defense Industries Association of Europe, and as co-chairman of the Italy-Japan Business Group. For our audience, a couple of housekeeping notes. We encourage you to join the discussion on Twitter using the hashtag #ForwardDefense or by tweeting at ACMidEast. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the discussion. And to begin, given that you just came back from Munich, maybe you could share your impressions from the conference. What were the key takeaways for you from this big conference of global leaders discussing security issues?
First of all, that there is a very clear change of mindset, at least in Europe, on defense, which is incredibly important. Today, while till some years ago there were discussion on the social correctness of defense industry, today it's not anymore a topic. As you know, all the European countries are going up to the 2% at least in terms of defense expenditure. And there is a very clear change of mindset on the fact that we are not anymore in peacetime in terms of industrial production, but that we have to move towards a crisis time management. So we need a coherent change by the industry, by the political world and the defense system in order to work together on how to fulfill the new needs. And this was very clearly perceivable in Munich.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the need for the defense industry in the war in Ukraine, because it seems to me that one of the lessons we've learned is that the scale of munitions production, of weapons production in the United States and other allied countries is insufficient to meet the demands of supplying Ukraine, making sure we have the weapons to defend ourselves. So what does this insufficiency reveal about long-term issues that governments must consider when working with defense industry?
First of all, that you already said the answer. We need a long-term perspective. So it's very, very important to have this long-term perspective, not in order to go up in terms of production, then the day after to go down. So we need stability, maybe also a peak in terms of production, then a reduction, but it's important that we redefine the business model. Anytime we produce something, we have a buy a buy period of time where we order the long lead items. Then we have the production, and then we have the final assembly line. If you split in these three different categories a time frame, you can see that the buy activity is by far the longest one in the production time. So we need to have a good planning in order, and maybe also financial support in order to have a warehouse of this long lead item. Also because many of these items are produced by SMEs that are less flexible than a large company. So we have really to plan properly in order to reduce the time frame for the overall production. We have also to understand that we need orders because the industry is not producing for the warehouse, also for security reasons. So it's important to manage properly this second topic. And lastly, in my opinion, is also important not to be confused by short-term issues vis-à-vis long-term issues. So to increase the production is relevant. Clearly, I'm focused on Leonardo, but for instance, we can increase dramatically our production rate. Today we are working on 5 days, 2 shifts. We can move to 6 days, 3 shifts. You can imagine with the same fixed asset, we can increase production significantly. The problem again is the supply chain and also the employee base. I don't think that should be good for the industry to hire people and then to fire after a few months. Also in terms of social acceptance of our industry. So again, to have a long-term perspective is very, very important. Having said that, the short-term problems are important. We have to increase production capability because we need more ammunition, more missiles, more platform in many cases. But also the long-term topics are very, very important. Where to invest, how to invest on the new technologies, how to cooperate on the new technologies, also on a transatlantic base. So I think that all these elements have to be on the table as well.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned new technologies because I did want to turn to that. You know, in the past, it was the defense departments, the Pentagon, that were developing the new technologies that would spin off into the private sector, you know, the internet as an example. Now it seems to be the reverse, that the newest innovations are coming from the private sector, and the Defense Department, ministries of defense are looking to incorporate those new technologies you know, from Silicon Valley and other innovation hubs. As the leader of a defense firm, what is your experience in incorporating leading innovations from the commercial sector into your defense business?
We have developed quite an interesting area for managing innovation. We have our own labs, internal labs on the digital area, for instance. We have as well a business innovation factory where we collect new entities from the venture capital world. So we already had 2 calls for different companies. The first one was on servitization, and the second area was gamification. And now we are working on a second call in the cyber domain and the space domain. So we are really calling for, and I think that today we have just invested in 3 of the companies we have identified. So it's very interesting. We have an international call. We had the participation of more or less 150 companies. Then we down selected 10 of them. These companies are working with us. They have a tutor and a partner within the company. And at the end of the process, after 6 months, when we have a proof of concept, we invest in 3 of them. So it's very interesting. As I said, the labs are relevant as well. But I think it's important that we consider that there are some technologies where the civil world is more advanced, typically artificial intelligence, big data, simulation, digital twin, which are incredibly relevant for our industry. But there are threats, hypersonic, for instance, or direct energy weapon, which is not a threat, is a tool, but which are not civil, but we have to invest as an industry. So we don't have to say all the innovation will come from the civil world, but we have to work as usual on threat, operational needs, requirements, and to understand where the best can come from. So we have to be very flexible and open, but we have also to know that there is something that cannot be forgot.
It's very interesting, and it's a challenge that we're dealing with in the United States as well, that the Pentagon realizes that the best technology is out in the commercial sector, and it also realizes that it has a problem adopting that technology. So here at the Atlantic Council, we've started a commission co-chaired by former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, former Secretary of the Air Force Debbie Lee James, making recommendations for how the Pentagon can better incorporate technology from the commercial sector. And it sounds like maybe Leonardo has some ideas that this commission could consider. But I did want to turn to allies and partners because we are in this new era of strategic competition. The United States often says that one of our greatest strengths is working with allies and partners. And so when it comes to defense capabilities, I think that means that the Department of Defense needs to be getting the best capabilities, not just from the United States, but globally from allies and partners. We often hear from foreign defense companies, though, that it's hard to break into the U.S. market. So from your point of view, from Leonardo, what has been your experience cooperating with partners in the United States? And what is your experience selling to the U.S. Department of Defense? And what needs to be done to facilitate the United States to better be able to purchase capabilities from outside of the United States?
We have three different types of cooperation with the United States. One is being American in US, so Leonardo DRS is an example. So Leonardo DRS is a company which is owned by Leonardo. Is a second-tier company working with the Pentagon and with the main prime in US. So we are a second-tier company. We are working very well. We manage Leonardo DRS with a proxy governance system, which in my opinion is really good. There has been many discussions in Italy if it was good or not. I think it's good because we can participate to any classified program, and we are very happy with that. And this is the first way we cooperate with US. The second way is with European assets sold to the US defense system, typically the MH-139, which is an helicopter, a medium-sized helicopter sold to the land system for the defense of strategic sites. It's the first time that a non-US helicopter is sold here. Why that? Because the operational cost and the acquisition cost and the operational cost compared to the capabilities is really effective. So I think that you have to be good, and today there is a market here. The third area, the second area is the TH-119 is the trainer helicopter for the Navy, the Marines Corps, and the Coast Guard. Is a trainer, is another very good example. The third area of cooperation is what we do in Italy. For instance, in Cameri, we have the final assembly line and MRO capabilities for the F-35. We produce as well wings in a more efficient way than Fort Worth, so I think is really, really good. So these are the three types of cooperation we have. I don't know if you are lucky or we are good, but it's possible to have a strong cooperation. This, in my opinion, strengthens the factor that for the US procurement system to be open to non-US companies can add value to the American system. So I'm really very supportive of this type of relation that have to become more and more as a peer-to-peer relation, in my opinion.
Well, I agree. It's so important that the United States get the best capabilities wherever they can be found, and it's
from allied countries like-minded, because it's important. So the security topic is always relevant.
That's a good point. A trusted NATO ally, and it sounds like you have cracked the code on how to break into the U.S. Defense market. You know, the Department of Defense has identified 14 priority technology areas: biotechnology, hypersonics. My view is that 14 priorities means you don't really have priorities. That's a long list. In your view, what are some of the most important emerging technologies for national security? Is there more the governments can do to equip the commercial sector to develop the applications of these technologies?
I think that the digital area clearly is incredibly important. As I already said, artificial intelligence, big data, simulation, digital twin, in my opinion, are as well augmented reality are incredibly relevant as technologies for the future. Artificial intelligence is implied today in any of our system and platforms, even cybersecurity. So I think that this is clearly incredibly relevant. Hypersonic is very relevant as an attack system, but as well the defense system from hypersonic, I think, has to become more and more important, which means a multi-domain system and interoperability. Multi-domain and interoperability brings us immediately to secure communication. So secure communication of any means, 5G, 6G, quantum, will be more and more relevant. So this is for sure another incredibly important technology on which many of us are investing. And then as well all the unmanned systems are evolving and are technologies where I think there is still a lot to do in terms of innovation in all the domains. Last but not least, robotics. Robotics will be relevant for the space domain, but as well for underwater. So I think that this is another area in terms of innovation that is very important. These are the priorities of Leonardo.
Okay, well that's
today we are not investing in these areas on everything. I've not named a direct energy weapon, which is also another incredibly relevant technology.
Well, as I said, DoD had 14 priorities. I think that's too long. Your list is narrower, so they sound like
shorter.
They sound like real priorities.
Yes, but I think that you were talking of biochemistry and biological. This is also very relevant. We are not involved, but I think that it's proper that the Pentagon is focused on that.
Yes, and you mentioned that directed energy is not on your list, and so that is there a reason why Leonardo is not?
Direct energy weapon is on our list. We are investing in UK. with our defense electronics division based in Edinburgh. So
Okay.
it's an area which is also important.
Okay.
Clearly, this brings immediately to the how to manage energy on platforms, so batteries, where we are not investing, but is an area which is also very, very important.
Yes, and my background is in strategic forces, and there's a lot of potential applications for directed energy when it comes to air and missile defense
Yes,
as well.
but you need a lot of energy in a very short time, so you need a storage capability which is quite significant.
Good. Well, I'm glad companies like Leonardo are working on that. Both sides of the Atlantic, there's increasing concern about China. There's a selective decoupling that is essentially already happening with the U.S. Congress putting in place legislation on chips. China, essentially decoupling from us in certain ways, with Xi cracking down on certain sectors. I feel like there are some people who say that we have to decouple. The security risks are too grave, especially after what we saw with the war in Ukraine, of us being too dependent on Russian energy. On the other hand, you sometimes have people who say, no, there's a lot of business still to be done in China. We can't afford to decouple. What is your view on this? Should we be thinking about selective decoupling with China?
I think that the answer is exactly that. We cannot decouple 100%. We have to manage a selective decoupling. I think that there is a topic which is also very important. And this value was not only for China, but in any situation is sustainability. So you have to decouple from China for strategic reason, mainly in the defense sector, but not only. Sorry, again, not only. Chip is incredibly important, but you can't be dependent from any supplier, in my opinion. So it's important in any situation you are to have a diversified source of suppliers in order to be sure that even if something is not going in the right direction, you can manage your survivability. So I think this is something important we have seen in energy, but again, the cyber independence is very, very relevant as well. So chips is a clear example. I think that there is as well the issue of, for instance, hyperscaler. To be sure that, for instance, in Europe we don't have an hyperscaler. I think that this could be a problem for us in the future. To have a strong cloud capability is also very important, because you don't have artificial intelligence without a strong cloud capability. So all these elements have to be considered.
Wonderful. If I could, I'd like to turn to transatlantic relations. And in recent national legislation, including the Inflation Reduction Act, the United States has begun investing in domestic production of microchips, green energy technologies. But many Europeans have complained that these domestic manufacturing requirements are essentially kind of protectionism, and contrary to the spirit of free trade, that these kind of measures could undermine the transatlantic trade relationship. How do you view this issue?
I think that to have a free, again, within a system of allied partners is important to keep a free trade system, because protectionism can create a non-development in some areas, or can bring, for instance, Europe to react in a similar way. This would mean, for instance, to work on ITAR-free products that I think wouldn't be positive for no one of us, because if you close US, Europe will tend to close itself. So is not logic and is not valid. So I think that in a system of allied partners, you have to keep an open capability. Having said that, I do understand as well that when we are talking of money of the American taxpayer, you want to create American employment. So, and this is very logic. So it's something that has to be managed in a balanced way. But again, too close, I think, is dangerous because you can have a similar reaction on the other side.
Yes, and I do think that this legislation was probably put through without thinking about the domestic motivations, without giving adequate consideration to what some of the international ramifications might be.
Again, what is important is to have in mind a long-term sustainability for all of us. So we cannot be dependent from some area of the world, also in terms of rare materials, for instance. So it's important to have always this long-term perspective.
Yes. Well, speaking of a long-term perspective, I think maybe the biggest strategic question facing the United States right now is how can the United States deal with two near-peer revisionist nuclear-armed powers, Russia and China, at the same time, and meanwhile still has to deal with Iran, North Korea, violent extremists. Many answers to that question, but I think all of them point to allies and partners doing more. What do you see as the role of Italy in managing these challenges and maybe doing more in Europe?
First of all, I think that Italy has been always an incredibly strong ally of US and will remain so. There are many times, I don't have the exact number, but I think that there are at least 20 million of Americans that are Italian, that do have Italian roots. So there is this incredibly strong tie. We have as well a very similar, I'm used to say, diversity management capability, in the sense that US is a famous melting pot, but Italy is the same. So Italy is a sum of cities. So we are used to manage diversity, and creating value out of that. So this is, in my opinion, one of the strong ties, cultural ties we have of US and Italy. Having said that, Italy do have as well an important role in Europe. I think that for US, in the long run, in order to face all the threats you were talking of, there is a strong need to have a strong and unified Europe. Because a strong and unified Europe can be a pillar in the defense of the Occidental system, value system. So I think this is very important, and Italy can be the bridge in order to connect all these elements. We are not a threatening country. We are a sort of, we are a bridge. I've been for a long period of time a banker, as you said before, and we were by far the largest bank in Central Eastern Europe. We had 20 banks in 23 different countries: Germany, Austria, Poland, Romania. And as Italians, we were always welcome in these countries because we were always capable to find the right solution with the right flexibility, but keeping a unified system. I think that Italy can play this role in Europe, and for US, in my opinion, is very important.
Good. Well, we're almost out of time, but maybe I'll end on a little bit of a lighter note. Part of this competition will be about soft power. This competition between democracies and autocracies. I'll put my cards on the table. I love Italy. I lived in Italy for a year. I teach a course on Machiavelli every year in Italy. And I think Italy is kind of a soft power, superpower. People love Italian food, Italian automobiles, Italian fashion. What advice do you have to Washington, to the free world about the soft power elements of this competition?
To utilize Italy, as I said. The largest exporting sector in Italy is machineries. Mainly, not fashion, it's interesting, mainly because of the fact that we are capable really to have right solutions for specific problems with a tailor-made production capability. So we are really capable to find solutions in very difficult situations. I think that this is one of our strengths. I'm sure that the US is valuing that quite a lot. And again, since there are no discussion on the alliance we have, and it's been demonstrated by, we had many different governments, but the transatlantic pillar has been always there. I think this is something on which we have to continue to work and to invest.
Great. Well, we're about out of time. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave me or the audience with?
That it's always a great pleasure to be here in US. I feel at home, and really this relation we have within the two countries and as a company we have with US is incredibly important for us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Profumo. I agree the U.S.-Italy relationship is very important. Transatlantic ties are important, and we're very grateful that you made the time in your busy schedule to stop by and chat with us at the Atlantic Council. You're always welcome.
Many thanks, Mr. Kroening, and I hope to come back soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.